Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, now that quarterback Jalen Hurts has his mega contract extension, what should he want next from the Eagles? The Eagles were already busy at work on Wednesday afternoon, continuing to build around Hurts with a new weapon, all that and more on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Wednesday edition of the show. Shout out to the everydayers, Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. You can always follow us on Twitter at Locked On Birds and at DiBiase LOE. Really excited to continue on this week of shows. Tomorrow is the 1 week separation from us and the 2023 NFL Draft. Cannot believe it's already here. Next Thursday, Gino and I are going live starting at 6 o'clock, and then we are with you all throughout the night as the Eagles, right now at least, as of now, Howie Roseman, I will guarantee you, does not make the picks at both 10 and 30. Whether he moves up or down, that remains to be seen. But for now, we're going to be with you from pick 10 on Friday in round 2 and 3, and then hopefully Howie does collect some more day 3 selections to make it an entertaining stream on Saturday. All 3 days we are live for you right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. But this week, outside of draft talk, we've had to really make it all about the quarterback, all about Jalen Hurts, who signed his mega 5-year contract extension on Monday, worth $255 million over those 5 years, $179 million guaranteed. Of course, the salary cap hits, though, look immaculate for the Birds. His hit does not go over $30 million until 2026. So shout out to Howie Roseman for getting this done. Shout out to the Eagles for finding their franchise quarterback and finding a way to build around him for the long term. And that's what I want to continue to talk about on today's edition of the show, because I think when you look at all these star quarterbacks in the league right now, it is very hard to find a signal caller outside of Hurts that has a better support system. I mean, I think Patrick Mahomes, obviously with Andy Reid and Travis Kelce, having that big two, the big three of Mahomes, Reid, and Kelce is very Patriots-like, right? With Belichick, Brady, and Gronk. But when it comes to the overall collection of talent Mahomes has versus Hurts, I think Hurts surpasses him. Josh Allen has Stephon Diggs, but outside of that, I think Jalen Hurts has more weapons than Josh Allen. When you look at Lamar Jackson, when you look at Joe Burrow might be the next one, right? With Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Joe Mixon, Hayden Hurst. But outside of Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert's in there, Trevor Lawrence. They have some weapons, but none of them have the collection of talent that Hurts has, with an elite offensive line in front of him, with DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown, arguably the best NFL duo at receiver in the league. You look at Dallas Goedert, it's a top 3 tight end. You look at the running backs I think he still has a good collection of runners, a good coaching staff, a great GM, a really good defense. Jalen Hurts has an incredible support system. Howie Roseman has done a much better job setting Hurts up in the second deal than he did Carson Wentz after 2018. But at the same time, they do have a lot of cap space, and Howie's going to continue to try to support his quarterback. Now that Jalen does have that new deal, what should he want next from the Eagles? Like, what's on Jalen Hurts' wish list for the draft next week, for free agency still? They made a free agent signing a receiver today that we'll get into in segment 2, and for the long term, because every franchise quarterback, like if you're the guy, you have more power than almost anybody in your organization outside of potentially the owner, GM, and coach. Like, those are the 4 pillars. It's the GM, the owner, the coach, and then if you have an elite quarterback, that guy has as much power as any player, first off, and almost anybody else within the organization, regardless of their position, especially when they sign the deal that Jalen Hurts just did for 5 years, the most money in NFL history handed out to a single player. Carson Wentz had that kind of power after the 2018 season when he signed his mega deal. I remember the reports that Howie Roseman wanted Carson Wentz to sit down and watch some prospects at tight end, at receiver, at running back, some guys that Carson might want to play with. Like, he had that kind of say. I remember he worked out with Cooper Kupp, and Carson Wentz, maybe the GM is better than Carson Wentz, the quarterback, because he really wanted the Eagles to select Cooper Kupp on day 2 or day 3 of that draft. The Eagles drafted a running back and receiver in 2019 that year in the second round. So they were committed to building around Carson, and they wanted his input. They gave him film to watch some prospects, and they wanted to know who he preferred. Of course, what Wentz said wasn't gospel. I don't think he loved J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, right? And what Jalen Hurts is going to say, like, he's not going to be the GM and quarterback like there's head coaches and GMs, Chip Kelly. He's not going to have the pull of what Tom Brady had in Tampa Bay, or, to go to another sport, what GM LeBron James has had with the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Miami Heat, and the Los Angeles Lakers, the Cavaliers twice, and then Los Angeles. He's not going to have that kind of pull, but he's definitely going to have say. He's going to have power as the elite quarterback, because the Eagles want to keep him happy, and they want to make sure this relationship lasts a lot longer than it did with their last franchise guy in Carson. So with that being said, Jalen Hurts is, he's a selfless guy. He's a humble player. He's all about the team first. So that he believes in this front office and coaching staff to put the right pieces around him. So I don't think he'll ever overstep. But if he, let's say he did have some requests, let's say he had some demands now as the guy in Philadelphia, what would be on Jalen Hurts' wish list moving forward? I think number one, a key would be continued protection up front. That was a big reason for Carson Wentz's downfall. There's so many reasons, as you guys have heard on this podcast 800 times. But in 2020, what happened? Carson had 14 different offensive line combinations because of all the injuries. And that was a huge reason for his historic regression. They were able to protect him from 2016 to 2019. They had an incredible offensive line in pretty much every one of those seasons. But after that, they couldn't protect him. Right now, Jalen Hurts is Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata, Jason Kelce, Cam Jurgens. He has, to me, the best offensive line in football, but he should want this Eagles team to continue to invest up front in protecting him, because a lot of these quarterbacks that blow up early on in their career, if they don't make it long-term, what's a key reason? It's injuries. That was a key for Carson Wentz's downfall. It's a key for, you look at Cam Newton's downfall. Matt Stafford has had some injuries later on in his career. So these guys that don't work, injuries a lot of the time have a huge reason behind it. RG3, Robert Griffin III. You look at a lot of these mobile quarterbacks, they're not able to make it long term. So he needs to, and Lamar Jackson, you look at the injuries he's had the last few years with Baltimore, those injuries have been inside the pocket. So Hurts should want this team to continue to invest in, get that right guard of the future long-term, because Cam Jurgens, even if he starts this year, he's going to start at center long-term. Get that long-term replacement for Lane Johnson. Yes, he just signed an extension through 2025, 2026, potentially going to play for another 2 to 3 seasons, but you want to get that long-term right tackle. Having those two pillars at the tackle spots, very important. You have Mailata, you have Dickerson, you have Jurgens. You potentially right now have 3/5 of your offensive line core locked up long-term. But if I'm Jalen, I'm saying you've got 3 picks in the first 2 rounds. You've got 4 picks in the first 3 rounds. One of those picks better be on an offensive lineman. And I don't want just top-tier starters. I want depth, because if Lane Johnson goes down, they shouldn't have to deal with Jack Driscoll being the right tackle. So that's why I would love the idea of taking a player in the first 2 rounds on the offensive line that can, kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I would love to get a long-term replacement for Lane Johnson at right tackle that can also play right guard for a year or 2. So like Paris Johnson from Ohio State started his career at guard with the Buckeyes. Peter Skoronski, some people actually might be projecting to be more of a guard long-term in the NFL than tackle, despite him being maybe the best tackle prospect this year in the draft when it comes to consensus mock drafts and rankings. So maybe one of those 2 players. Maybe you go with Osiris Torrance and you take a guard at the end of the first round. But a Cody Mock from North Dakota State, to me, can play all 3 spots, center, guard, and tackle. I would really like to get one of those guys for Jalen long-term. And also Hurts should be saying, make sure you pay Landon Dickerson, because he is one of, if not the best young interior offensive lineman in football. Another thing that can't hurt, continue to add weapons around him. Of course, you've got A.J. Brown, you've got Dallas Goedert, you've got DeVonta Smith, you've got Quez Watkins, but adding weapons can't hurt. They did that today, so we will talk about it. If I'm Jalen Hurts, I'm also saying Pay DeVonta Smith. Don't do what the Dallas Cowboys did and get cheap and let Amari Cooper go to prioritize paying Lamb. No, you paid A.J. Brown. I structured this deal with you to give you a lot of money up front in salary cap space. Give that money to my boy, DeVonta Smith. So Jalen Hurts can carry. He is a quarterback that you win because of, not just win with. Look at Super Bowl 57, but he shouldn't have to. He should not ever have to do what Carson Wentz did in 2019 and attempt to do in 2020. So Jalen should continue to ask for a stable support system up front and with his weapons. But really what he should do is just say, keep building the way you've always tried to build, Philadelphia, because I think the Eagles have the right philosophy down of what positions on both offense and defense to prioritize. But right now, Jalen is set up pretty nicely for the future throughout, you go to 2025, look at so many core pieces, star pieces that are locked up long-term for Jalen. He is really set up for success. And I think he's even better set up for 2023. I think the Eagles made an upgrade at the wide receiver position on Wednesday afternoon. We'll get into that signing coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. And guys, today's show is sponsored by the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is FanDuel. Grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back, and there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. Aaron Judge to pick up where he left off with a home run. You can bet on a pitcher to go over on strikeouts, build a SGP with your favorite matchup of the day. You could also bet on the NBA playoffs are going on right now. The NHL playoffs just started, NFL futures, all that and more. So don't miss your chance on a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Eagles fans, we're continuing on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making us part of your day. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to the everydayers. On tomorrow's show, I want to talk about Jalen Hurts some more. Does Jalen Hurts need to change his play style to maintain his health and make sure he's the Eagles' long-term quarterback? Do the Eagles need to change the way they make play calls for Jalen now that he has that new mega 5-year deal? Also, are we ever concerned about Jalen Hurts potentially regressing with the Eagles after this contract? Because we just saw it with Carson Wentz. Do you have any fear that Jalen could suffer that same fate? That's coming up on Friday, or Thursday's edition, I should say, of Locked On Eagles. And of course, so much more draft content. The draft is just 1 week away, starting tomorrow. We're 7 days away from round 1. But the Eagles are still busy in free agency. So on Wednesday, according to Adam Schefter, and I really like this signing, the Philadelphia Eagles continue to support Jalen Hurts with more weapons. They signed former Atlanta Falcons wide receiver, and I think this is a name that a lot of people are going to mess up. I think I got it right, though. Wide receiver Olamide Zaccheaus is signing with the Philadelphia Eagles. Zaccheaus is a player that I've seen thrown out there a lot for the Birds over the last few weeks, now that the main waves of free agency are over and everything is, the pool is pretty much picked clean. Zach Pascal left for the Arizona Cardinals. We said maybe the Eagles could draft a receiver in the middle rounds, maybe late rounds, maybe even early to push Quez Watkins as competition for that wide receiver 3 spot. But a lot of people said, and I agree with it, that Zaccheaus might be, and I think we're going to nickname him OZ. That's what Gino said on Twitter. So I'm going to call him OZ. OZ, I think, was at least the best of the best that you could find left in free agency. Last year in Atlanta, actually a career year. And I'll take these numbers as a wide receiver 3B/wide receiver 4. I think it's an upgrade over Zach Pascal. 40 receptions last year for 533 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's a very reliable player like Pascal. I think he's got really good hands. Little undersized, but it's got some speed, run after the catch ability, some good short area burst. This isn't a 4-3 player, but I think he did make a lot of plays down the field for the Falcons, can make some really tough catches, and I think he's a change-up type of player, a really tough player to go over the middle in the slot. And I think that's a nice compliment to what you have in Quez Watkins. I think Zaccheaus is really good competition for Quez, and I like what his signing represents because he's kind of like Pascal, where he's not outright going to replace Watkins. And I want that to be the case because I still believe in Quez. I still think the 2021 Quez is possible for 2023 behind A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith. I still saw some flashes with Quez last year, I should say, when you look at the plays he made against Washington before the fumble, when you look at the deep bomb against Minnesota, when you look at the pass interference calls that he drew against Washington, the clutch touchdowns against Green Bay and Indianapolis. Yes, of course, there were the interceptions against Dallas. There were the, significant drops in the playoffs. You look at that play in the Super Bowl, could have completely changed everything. Like Quez, he said it himself in his end of the year press conference that he had a down season for his standards and for Philadelphia, who at one point last offseason said they think he's a wide receiver too. So definitely a down year, and you had to bring in some competition. You had to bring in at least a Pascal type who could rotate in with Quez if he struggles again, because you don't want to, of course, Brown, Smith, and Goddard, they're target monsters, but you never know. I mean, if Dallas Goedert goes down again like he did last year, if you lose A.J. Brown to an injury or DeVonta Smith gets banged up, you've got to have another guy, right? You've got to have another guy. I thought Quez stepped up a little bit last year when Dallas went down, but you've got to have that other receiver. And Zaccheaus, coming off a career year, I think offers a lot of things that Watkins does not. And he's very reliable. He's got a higher floor than Quez. Quez has the higher ceiling. I think that is the perfect player to have in this rotation. Now you've got Brown, Smith, Watkins, Zaccheaus, Covey. Maybe you draft a guy in the 7th round, but I think I'm good at receiver. I'm going to take a guy if I trade down and find a way back into the 4 through 6 rounds. If I'm Philadelphia, if I'm Howie Roseman, I would much rather take a tight end at that spot. I'd rather take a running back if I'm going to go with a weapon, I think now over receiver, because I really do like Zaccheaus. He's young as well. All 4 of the Eagles' top receivers now, all under or at least at the age of 25 years old. So I think this is a really good move. You continue to build around Jalen Hurts. Zaccheaus pushes Quez Watkins as competition, showed that he can be more, I think more than even what Zach Pascal has been over the last few years. So you push Quez Watkins, but you don't outright replace him. I think that is the right strategy to take. And I'm excited about this signing. I think it's a really good move. It's the best move you can make on April 19th, this late into the offseason in free agency. I'm surprised Zaccheaus was even still out there, because I thought this wide receiver class in the draft is weaker, and free agency, the free agent pool was weak. It was Jacoby Myers and, of course, Odell Beckham just got signed, but there weren't, Juju Smith-Schuster, Nelson Aguilar. There weren't a lot of Paris Campbell and Mecole Hardman. There weren't a lot of really good receivers. So Zaccheaus being still out there is tremendous value for the Birds, and they didn't really spend a lot of money. So I think it's a really good move. All right, Eagles fans, coming up next, one last thought on Jalen Hurts to wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. It's a great deal for Philadelphia, Hurts' contract. You lock up a QB long-term that's 24, that's elite. You save a lot of cap room up front by backloading the contract. Jalen made sure this was as much as a team-friendly deal as possible. But how did Jalen look coming out of this deal? Did he sign the contract too soon? We'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks for making us a part of your day. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. Did Jalen Hurts sign this contract extension too soon? For him, at least. Because for the Eagles, as I mentioned at the end of segment 2, you look at the salary cap hits for the Eagles, it's 6.1 next year. It goes up into the double digits at 11 the year after. Then it's at 21, then 31. I believe it goes up by 10 million every single year. But for the next 4 years, Jalen never surpasses $32 million on the books when it comes to his cap hit. Whereas like a Ryan Tannehill is $36.6 million for Tennessee next year. Daniel Jones is at $30+ million for the Giants over the next few years. The Eagles made out like bandits, right? And Jalen Hurts did too. $179 million guaranteed, $51 million a year average per salary, $255 million total in net value on this contract. Like, that's as good as you can do. Jalen Hurts became the highest paid player in NFL history. It's hard if you're Jalen Hurts at 24 years old, especially considering where you were a year ago, to be complaining about the deal, to be complaining about the situation he's in. But could he have done better? Like, did he sign this deal too soon? Considering Lamar Jackson's contract still has to get done, Joe Burrow's, Justin Herbert's, should he have maybe tried to hold out? And he does have leverage. The difference between him and, Lamar Jackson was the Ravens had that 5th-year option because he was a first-round pick. They have the franchise tags. Joe Burrow, first-round pick, first overall. They have a 5th-year option. Justin Herbert, first-round pick in that 2020 class. You have an extra year of negotiating. You have an extra year of team-controlled money that the Bengals can utilize, that the Chargers can for their own benefit. Whereas the Eagles, because Jalen Hurts was a second-round pick that you didn't plan on being the guy, you only have 4 years on this deal. One was used to have Jalen as a backup to Carson. 2021 he starts, but you weren't really sold on Hurts being the long-term guy. And then last year was your last chance of, let's see if he can be the guy. And he became the guy, nearly winning you a title, carrying you to a Super Bowl. So now it's like you only have this 1 year left on the rookie deal. And then Jalen's an unrestricted free agent. So Jalen Hurts did have some leverage where he could have said, he could have tried to do what Lamar Jackson's been doing and say, here is where I want to go. This is the contract I want. This is the ceiling I want. You're going to meet this. Or basically he could hold out, or he could try to be stingier with negotiations. He didn't have to sign first. I think he could have waited. And I think he could have put the Eagles' feet to the fire a little more than these other quarterbacks could with their teams because of that looming free agent period. And of course, you could franchise tag him for sure, but the Eagles do not like to franchise tag players. So Jalen had some negotiating power, but that's not who Jalen Hurts is. He's selfless. He is very team first. He wants to win championships. He's very old school. He again reminds a lot of us of Kobe Bryant, and he gives me Russell Westbrook vibes almost, right? Where he's got that he's wired in this old school way, and winning, he truly is obsessed with winning. That is the priority. So I think he wanted to make this easier for the Eagles to help support him with weapons and, role players and core pieces on both sides of the ball by signing this deal earlier, saving them a little bit of money, because each one of these quarterbacks is going to reset the market. I think Lamar is going to reset it, then Burrow, then Herbert. So Jalen helped the Eagles out by getting this deal done first and allowing them to backload the hell out of this deal so they can have cap space now to support him. So Jalen maybe could have held out for a little bit more, but that's not who he is. And also it's splitting hairs. Like when you look at what Jalen just got, yes, is Burrow going to likely get more? I think he's going to get more. Will Lamar Jackson get more? Probably a little bit more. Will Justin Herbert get more? Even if he's the one guy I think probably doesn't deserve to get paid more than Jalen Hurts, yeah, he'll end up getting paid more. Normally, when you have an elite quarterback that's available for a new deal, he's going to reset that market and jump the guy that just got that next contract. So these other guys are going to get a little bit more probably, as Jalen did. He got more than Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. But we're splitting hairs. It really isn't that big of a difference. And Jalen wanted to get this done now. I think the Eagles wanted to get this done now. I think it's win-win. You get $179 million guaranteed. You can make upwards of $255 million. So I think it's win-win. And that's just who Jalen is, though. It's really cool to see a guy that's wired in this way. Because as I said, it's old school. And I'm not saying athletes shouldn't be, player first and get your bag, especially in the NFL, which is a cutthroat league, right? It's a selfish league when it comes to what the teams are trying to do. So you should be that as well. But it's cool to see Jalen. He feels old school. He feels like some of these other NBA guys, right? That you look at and you're like, okay, they would have made it in the 90s. Like that's who this kind of guy is. I think that's Jalen. He's a rare breed and he got his money for sure. And I think he definitely helped out the Eagles with the way they structured this and the timing of the signing. All right, Eagles fans, that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Thank you so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Subscribe to the podcast on all platforms and on YouTube as well for a show Monday through Friday. Shout out to the everydayers. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Also follow us on Twitter at Locked On Birds and at DiBiase LOE. We'll see you for tomorrow's show. Going to continue to talk about Jalen Hurts. No regression coming, right? We're confident in that. How should the Eagles approach play calling for Jalen next year and beyond? Some draft talk at safety. I got some thoughts at safety, all that and more on tomorrow's show. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go Birds.